All right, well, beautiful. So we've kind of talked through the water side of things, and then this is where some things start to change. Where, well, I mean, we've been talking about other elements as well, but this is one of the areas where things have really started to shift with this style. What do you have going on as far as hot side hop additions when you make hazy?
We're not doing anything until Whirlpool. No bittering additions at all. Nothing late. Everything at Whirlpool and everything at 180 degrees or lower. So.
Mm-hmm. And okay, and so you are dropping your Whirlpool temperature.
Yep.
And
yeah,
you
we
do.
recirc back through the heat X right into the top of the kettle and drop that down. And we'll do one or two different things. We've been using Citra Incognito, either dosing that directly into the Whirlpool or directly into the fermenter. So we'll add it under positive pressure to the bottom of the fermenter, and then run about a barrel of 180 degree to depending on how much bitterness we wanted to extract. Up
You
to
wild man. I love it.
well,
I've been wanting to do this. You savage. You did it.
it
Yeah.
works. It works well. We've done it a couple different ways, and we've done it with two different products. Salvo, which is a product from Hopsteiner, I believe, which it doesn't add any bitterness, and then Incognito, which is from Haas, I believe. Hopefully, I got those right. So we might do it that way, or add those directly to the Whirlpool.
Sure.
Part
And
of our
so,
frustration with, and this is nothing that we
yeah.
pioneered. This Kelsey McNair at North Park Brewing is an absolutely phenomenal pioneering IPA brewer. Came up with this method, and it was out of his frustration, and I'm sure the frustration of every brewer that's used those products in the kettle of everything in there being completely coated with hop oils that were not cheap, and not getting that stuff into the fermenter. So
Sure.
he was playing around with adding directly to FV, and it works quite well.
Now, a small note on that. I was listening to something, and the fellow was saying that when he's using those liquid hot products that are meant for Whirlpool, he will add them first and then add pellets on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels as if when he does that, whether it coats the pellets, he feels like there's less of the oil left in the kettle or Whirlpool when he follows it up by a pellet addition. So I don't know if that's glomming onto it and pulling it into solution or not. But just one thing to think about. I don't know.
That's interesting. I was talking to our rep at Haas, and he said to go in with your cryo or your T90s first and get them all into solution and no longer floating, then to add the oil. So that did not happen. They were more worried about the oil getting bound up in the hops that are going to stay behind in the center of your Whirlpool, as opposed to letting it be in solution and going into your.
So that's compelling. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, to the point where he was, and sometimes I have a great big giant spoon that I keep up on the brew deck. I don't know why that seems silly, but it's
for
a big
hitting people.
20-barrel system, and I have a soup spoon up there. But once you get them spinning, you can kind of stir them in, and then add the incognito or whatever you're using after that, and so they don't get stuck onto that stuff. So
interesting. Okay. So this is an area where things get tricky, because if you actually want to understand what you're going to be pulling bitterness out of these beers. So I've done hazy beers where I've whirlpooled at 210. I've done 200, 190. I've done all the way down to 160. You use what for your recipe calculator?
I use Beersmith.
Beersmith, yeah, okay, me too. So, how do you calculate IBU in these beers when you are dropping Whirlpool temperature, different things like that?
Yeah, I use the same calculation every time, and I have one of the great things about having production beers that you brew all the time is that you can really develop a baseline of numbers and then translate, other recipes using that as your guidepost or whatever. So I know what 50 IBU tastes like on my system,
Sure.
sensory wise. So it can give me a pretty good idea of what I'm going to get out of Whirlpool. We're less concerned about that nowadays because we're able to adjust these beers in the bright tank. So we're looking to get maybe 35 IBUs out of the Whirlpool, and then be able to adjust downstream of there. So for us, the only concern about IBUs in the Whirlpool would be getting too much at this point. Really, just chasing the flavors and aromas that we want.
So, quick note on IBU because IBU are kind of a nebulous topic. So, if we're talking about if you're getting 50 IBU out of your Whirlpool, and you're getting 50 IBU in a different beer out of a 60-minute edition, do you feel as if the character of the bitterness between those two beers expresses in the same way?
Oh, of course not. They would be wildly different, and of course that's all relative to how big the beer is, how much residual sugar there is, etc. So 50 IBU is not 50 IBU. I mean, it may be measured at 50, the same as two beers, but sensory wise, they can be wildly different.
And that's what I was gonna say. Anecdotally and sensory wise, when I'm looking at a Whirlpool edition, IBU that I'm getting from a Whirlpool edition, I cut it in half in my mind. Like if it tells me I'm gonna get 70 out of something, I know it's gonna come across more like 35. And for everybody out there that's listening, some of that stuff is just getting reps and doing it and finding out. And so if you're one of those people that likes to kill it the first time and make it perfect, have some patience with these beer styles. As you're moving moving some of those different levers that you can use on the Whirlpool side, different temperatures, different types of hops, hop products, different things like that. Stay patient with it and keep searching. So, I think that's a big key with this beer style, because I think overall, I think the beers that are best in this category are the ones that are just bitter enough to be balanced.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed. And I think there's other ways you can balance too. I mean, as far as with some of your hop choices, I think maybe 35 IBU in a beer that's all Citra and is super fruit forward is going to taste a little different than 35 IBU in a beer that's like half Idaho 7 and half Citra. Something that's a little danker and had some piney notes or whatever. You can kind of firm the beers up in a way with your hop selection as well. So
when you are targeting beers for the Whirlpool, are there specific hops that you want to be using for the Whirlpool as opposed to the dry hop?
Yeah, absolutely. First, just on type, we prefer cryo in the Whirlpool. Whenever we have cryo around, we're going to try to pound that Whirlpool with it just to save on wort, and we like the flavor that cryo brings as opposed to T90s. I think you do need a blend of the two to get a nice rounded flavor. But as far as these beers are really difficult to get decent volume on the professional side of things or on the homebrew side of things.
Right.
I'm sure there are guys out there that are brewing 6.5 gallon batches and getting 3 gallons, 3.5 gallons. I know. If homebrewers are anything like I was back then, you're absolute savages with the ingredients. I think it's Jamil that said it. If more is good, like a lot is better for a homebrewer. I can't remember.
Well, yeah, and even McDowell used to say back in the day, like when they're talking about if you're finding a beer, if you're getting an IPA clear or whatever, and you're losing hop flavor and aroma, that's a recipe issue.
Right.
You just need more hops in the first place, right?
Yeah. People ask us all the time about the centrifuging these beers. We're lucky enough to have a centrifuge at the brewery, and they're like, well, how do you does it remove some hop flavor? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, what do you do? And I'm just like, put more hops in the beer.
I mean, that's the answer.
Like
yeah, I mean, that's the answer. And so,
but anyway, so for Whirlpool variety wise, we really like a lot of the stuff. YCH has done a bunch of research on hop survivables. If you're a customer of theirs, they can get you. You can ask them. They have a nice little booklet out that has some graphs in it and shows all the best varieties for getting that flavor out of the Whirlpool and into your finished beer. So definitely Mosaic Cryo is a big favorite of ours across the board. We like it dry hop and Whirlpool. Idaho 7, it's really nice there. It tends to be a little bit fruitier when you use it in Whirlpool because you're getting some biotransformation from your yeast. So Idaho 7, Centennial actually is probably the only place that I like to use that hop. That's just my personal taste. I'm not a huge fan of that hop, probably from overexposure to it.
From Michigan.
What else? Some of the
you mentioned one thing that I don't want to get away from. You mentioned that you do like to use cryo in the Whirlpool, both for volume saving, for less green matter, but you also like the flavor, but you also want it blended with some T90 traditional pellets. Yeah. So when you say you like that flavor, how do you feel as if the cryo expresses differently than an all? So a T90 cryo combination as opposed to just an all T90 contribution.
At least like using Mosaic as your example for us, the lots of Mosaic that we get, the T90s tend to be a lot more dank, piney, foresty. Kind of occasionally you get a little of the onion garlic thing out of them, as opposed to the cryo, which is quite a bit fruitier. So I mean, I think for dry hop, I'd rather use cryo Mosaic than T90s in our beers, and stick to the keeping the T90s in the fermenter or in the Whirlpool, I should say, and
sure.
And getting some of that biotransformation, which tends to soften those flavors up a little bit and get them more on the kind of thing.
Sure.
Largely, we tend to chase really fruity hops
sure.
in our brewery. Occasionally, we get into some dank stuff. More on that, I guess, when we talk about balance.
Sure. The other thing is in general, pounds per barrel. What are you looking at getting into the Whirlpool?
Probably too many.
Yeah. The right answer,
typically, I'm 33 pounds in the Whirlpool on a 20-barrel system, so a little bit north of 1.5 pounds per barrel.
Is 22 pounds of that cryo?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it depends. If we're going to straight hops and no incognito, we'll knock that down a bit, especially with incognito picking up IPAs on it.
Sure.
We're using, I think, 2 kilograms of incognito in a Whirlpool, which is the equivalent of roughly 25 pounds of T90 of this same variety. So that will definitely. A lot of the time when we use incognito, I'll go just 11 pounds of cryo and 2 kilograms of the extract.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. And so in your recipe calculator, what are you kind of trying to look to pull IBU wise out of that Whirlpool? What's the calculated number it'll give you?
Usually, I would say 40 to 55 on a single hazy, and then probably 10 or 15 IBUs higher than that on that.
Nice.
And granted, that's just what my software says. That's not like real world IBUs.
Sure. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to mention that you're using Beersmith and everything like that.
Absolutely. All of this stuff. None of this is. It's all in our experience. And I mean, how these things work on our system. I'm not saying it's how anybody should do anything. It's just what works for us. So.
Definitely. One thing we didn't mention is duration when you're doing that drop temperature Whirlpool. How long are you spinning? How long are you resting it?
It takes me usually about 10 to 15 minutes to drop to 180 through the heat X, and then we'll spin, pump at about half speed for 5 minutes typically, and then I rest for about 20, 25. As soon as that Whirlpool is slowed down or almost stopped, we'll start knocking out.
Ripping. Yep. We're in the same spot on that.